Some thoughts on why the mass media appears to be pushing gay rights. Aldous Huxley wrote in Brave New World, as political and economic freedom diminishes, sexual freedom tends compensatingly to increase. Which led me to ask the question, do you think mass media corporations really care about the plight of gays in Russia? It's amazing because normally they either ignore or fully support the trampling of all our other rights, whether we're gay or not. You may have seen this yesterday. Google waded into the Sochi gay rights row with this doodle which appeared at the top of every load of google.com. The rainbow-coloured flag, the gay flag, with the different images of Olympians. Google lending its support for this gay rights push in the context of Russia's so-called anti-gay law and the Sochi Olympics. So again, Google claims to support gay rights, but concurrently works with the NSA to trample everyone's privacy rights, gay or not. Of course, we know from recent revelations that Google gave the NSA access to a privately created FTP folder through which they downloaded your information, a violation of the Fourth Amendment, a violation of privacy rights in general. So Google is supposedly defending gay rights while trampling on everybody's privacy rights at the same time. Then we have other corporations like NBC affording 13 times more coverage to the Russian anti-gay law than attacks on Syrian Christians. Of course, here's the recent Pew study, Christians, the most oppressed religious group in the world. Why does the mass media and the establishment only seem to be concerned about the human rights of minority groups such as homosexuals, whereas they show absolutely no interest whatsoever in the human rights of Christian minority groups who are being persecuted all over the world? And you could say, well, the media is predominantly liberal, therefore it has an inherent bias not to favour so-called conservative causes or interests, such as the persecution of Christians. But then you could look at it from the other side of the political perspective, the more left-wing concern about the plight of the Palestinians, and again, the so-called liberal mainstream media ignores victims of Israeli aggression in Palestine. But they defend gay rights to the hilt. So they pick and choose, no matter what political perspective it's coming from, left or right, they pick and choose which human rights to defend in the mainstream media. And this is why. Behavioural freedom versus political freedom. The establishment only promotes and defends freedoms that pose no threat to the state, which is why they will try and make themselves look good by defending gay rights, whereas they will either completely ignore or even support the trampling of privacy rights, and again, largely deride or at least dismiss political protests such as anti-NSA protests, or as we saw before, concerns about the plight of Christians, or indeed the plight of Palestinians. Whenever the issue regarding human rights is political, the mainstream media has no interest, or in fact supports the oppression. Whereas when the human rights issue is behavioural, as in the context of gay rights, it poses no threat to the state, so it's safe for the mass media and the establishment to defend and support those rights because they pose no threat, and it makes them look good in the process. And of course, one of the key facets of this whole Russian anti-gay law debate, which was founded in the mainstream media on the lie, the hoax, that gays turning up for the Russian Olympics, or even those accused or suspected of being gay, would be arrested, which of course is complete baloney if you've actually read the law. But it's also based around the deliberate hypocrisy and ignorance of the fact that the United States is allied with at least 10 countries that have far, far more draconian anti-gay laws than Russia, and in many places, gays are actually put to death for their sexuality. But you won't see the mass media start a gigantic public relations campaign defending or promoting gay rights in these countries, in the countries that are closely allied with the United States. And what's amazing about this public relations campaign that's being supported by the mass media is that it actually reinforces negative stereotypes about homosexuals, which in fact would create more division and more opposition from those people who oppose the homosexual lifestyle or gay rights in general. This is an ad that's been played repeatedly on Britain's Channel 4, depicting this gay man as a fat, bearded, ugly individual writhing around in his pants. This is supposedly representative of gay people and a protest against Russia's so-called anti-gay law. And it reminded me of this pro-Obamacare ad put out by a group in the United States, which again used stereotypical portrayals of gay men as solely interested in basically looking at each other's asses as a political tool to push Obamacare. Again, another example of the gay rights movement being hijacked for pro-state propaganda. So here's my question. Why is the mass media, in its defense of gay rights, using the most stereotypical, divisive, and offensive portrayals, representations of gay people? Look at it from this perspective. If I was a gay man, and this is how the very serious human rights cause of gay rights was being represented, I would be offended. This is a fat guy dancing around in his pants. I mean, how serious is that in the context of human rights? And then look at it from the other perspective. If I was a right-wing Christian fundamentalist vehemently opposed to gay rights, would this kind of thing convince me otherwise? Or would it merely affirm my previously held prejudice of the gay stereotype of, the homosexual lifestyle being promiscuous, frivolous, destructive, inane, and having nothing to do with human rights whatsoever? These representations of gay people that the mainstream media is promoting in the so-called defense of gay rights are actually fostering and encouraging more divide and conquer between gay rights proponents and those who voice criticism and opposition to gay rights. They're actually fueling the continuation of this divisive issue. And this is what it comes down to: tolerance versus propaganda. The Western media is bashing Russia for this so-called anti-gay propaganda law, which has been completely mischaracterized if you read the actual law, which I documented in my previous video. So they're bashing Russia for their anti-gay propaganda, while themselves engaging in this aggressive pro-gay propaganda, but it actually portrays gays in a negative light. So either way you look at it, it's propaganda. This is not tolerance. Tolerance is accepting that people have got the right to live their lives however the hell they want, without state interference or without persecution. Tolerance does not mean that you have to support or embrace a certain lifestyle. It merely means that you have to tolerate it and, not incite violence against it.
Welcome to Tolerance Camp. You are here because you would not accept people's differences, because you refuse to accept the life choices of your fellow man. Well, those days are now over.
So it comes down again to these crucial questions. Does the mass media really care about the plight of gays in Russia? Normally they ignore or support the trampling of all our other rights. Because the establishment only promotes freedoms and rights that pose no threat to the state, as in behavioural freedoms which are expressed by everyone, whereas they discourage the exercise of political freedoms by not affording them the same attention, by not defending them to anything like the same level, and in fact by supporting the trampling of them, as I gave earlier with the example of the NSA spying issue, the persecution of Christians globally, and the persecution of Palestinians. None of those issues will ever receive anything like the same level of protection and defence compared to gay rights, because gay rights are a behavioural freedom and they pose no threat to the state, of which the mass media is merely a conduit and a mouthpiece. Affording the gay rights issue in the context of the Sochi Olympics and the Russian anti-gay law saturation coverage in comparison to massive stories like that which came out yesterday about the US State Department official Newland basically telling Ukraine how to run its country. The United States telling an entire country how to run its business with these faux revolutions, which has received, in comparison to the anti-gay story, virtually no mainstream media attention whatsoever. Yes, they've reported on it. They've afforded it nothing like the saturation coverage afforded to this gay rights issue. So again, by focusing on behavioural freedoms, it gives them the excuse to ignore massive political scandals, banking scandals, economic scandals that occur on a daily basis. This is also about divide and conquer. It's about keeping pro-gay rights activists and vehemently anti-gay rights activists in their opposite camp, preventing them from ever moving nearer to any kind of common understanding. And the way that's done is through portraying and representing gay rights in this very divisive and stereotypical manner. The reinforcement of this stereotype about gay people does nothing whatsoever to encourage tolerance and common understanding. It in fact encourages the opposite from the conservative Christian crowd of more hatred and more intolerance. So while with tunnel vision the mainstream media obsesses about this distraction, this side issue of gay rights, and in fact uses it to create more division, all our rights are being trampled on with barely a whimper of protest from the very same mass media and establishment that grandstands as being this great protector of human rights through the context, through the prism of the gay rights movement. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Check us out on Twitter at twitter.com/prisonplanet. I'm Paul Joseph Watson reporting for Infowars.com.